this idea of like, what is the bigger story, right? Which is
Yeah.
important for the journalist to think about, right? Because often journalists don't want to just cover a story that about a company. Like Elon can get away with just getting coverage for himself, right?
Yeah,
And maybe, the top 3% of companies and or CEOs are newsworthy in and of themselves, but everyone else sort of has to find something to go along for the ride with,
but
right?
the difference also is you don't want to get coverage like Elon. If you're a small business, chances are your business is not going to survive you being considered a dick.
Right. Yeah, that's a valid point as well.
Yeah.
But I guess really the point is, from a general PR perspective, both from the journalist's hat and the businesses responding to an SOS query, how should they make sure that they're not a dick, right? That they're not like overly pitching, but really more pitching like, here's what's going on in the industry, here's what's going on, with people who are solving this problem and trying to fit their narrative into the bigger narrative.
I think the key is create a story create a pitch that is short, 3 paragraphs at the most, that answers the query the journalist asked. Hey, you were doing a story about Fire Island beach houses. As someone who owns a Fire Island beach house, I can tell you the problems I've had with them because you're doing a story on problems with Fire Island beach houses. Problem number one, problem number two, problem number three. Here's my contact info. More than happy to chat. Bye. That's it.
Right.
And the second point is set an alarm for when those emails come out and answer immediately.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Super excited to catch up with my friend Peter Shankman. We've known each other longer than either of us would prefer to think about. And he's back in the helping of journalists while simultaneously helping brands and business owners mode, right? With Source of Sources this time, which is SOS, which is a lot of times what the reporter does when they're, 3 hours from deadline and they don't have the story yet. But it's also what happens when somebody who's got a great story wants to get it out there and is sort of needs help in getting it to the right folks. So, what was the catalyst, Peter, for you to decide, like, there's still a big need. Journalists are not dead. They haven't been replaced by AI. There's still need for a good story well told, and that SOS can help solve that problem.
Well, I mean, making SOS, I did not want to do it. I'm very truly the belief that you can't go home again. And this was 14 years ago, right? I sold H.A.R.O 14 years ago, and I kept getting emails from people telling me that what H.A.R.O is today, they didn't really like, and it turned into something they weren't a fan of. And it's like, well, I'm sorry about that, but it's like yelling at a chef because the food is bad 10 years after he left the restaurant, right? And so it wasn't. I put it in my head, and I was talking to my girlfriend, and she kept saying, you should really consider building this. It's a really good idea. Do it again. I'm like, and I just kept getting emails from people, and then when H.A.R.O they shut down the email system behind H.A.R.O, and that was really the purpose of it, because you're not going to log into a website 3 times a day, to remember to log into the website 3 times a day just to check your see if there might be any queries for you. So for me, it was really I said, okay, well, maybe I'll do something, and my ADHD is sort of like, okay, I can I'll build something, but I won't finish it, but okay, I'll finish it in 2 hours, and okay, it's done, and okay, I'll tell a few people about it, and now we have 20,000 members. So it's sort of one of those things where it fell into place. I blame my girlfriend for the entire thing without question. If she hadn't kept bugging me, I wouldn't have done it. But that being said, it seems to be taking off. We have a lot of journalists who are very happy that it's back. We have a lot of users who are very happy that it's back, or that it's in this incarnation. I don't want to say it's back, but it's in this incarnation, that I decided to create something I knew how to do and something I was good at. And I think that, for me, it's a different world now. I was thinking about what I'd compare it to, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Beverly Hills Cop 4, the Axel F version, and it's sort of like that. I'm now like a 55-year-old, or 50. Well, I'm a 50, going to be 52-year-old guy who's going in and playing the part of someone who was what, 36, 35 when I started this thing. So, but it's fun because there's a lot more tools and things we can do. And with that comes a lot more pitfalls. I've 14 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was running H.A.R.O, I didn't have to ban people for using AI to generate their pitches. Right now I do. And so it's sort of one of those things where, my goal is to continue to grow it and to make it useful and to help people. I think there aren't enough companies. I mean, you understand this running a nonprofit. There aren't enough companies that are based on the premise of helping people versus based on the premise of making money. And there's no reason you can't do both. Journalists have to do 10 times more with 5 times less. And to be able to create something that benefits both journalists and, keep in mind, the majority of, not the majority, but a good portion of the users of sorts of sources of SOS are small businesses and entrepreneurs. They're not, I mean, all the PR firms use them, they all do, but it's not entirely PR firms. It's primarily a lot of entrepreneurs, of small business owners, things like that, who are looking at the benefits of getting some free publicity, right? The PR firms are always going to use it, but small businesses are sitting there going, how do we get press and get people to know about what we're doing and how, without spending a fortune? Well, here's your answer. And so I'm seeing much more small business entrepreneurs using SOS today than I did when I ran the other one.
So here's another thing that's sort of changed since the H.A.R.O times, which is with influencers in particular, but also just sort of citizen journalists, right, with their own followings. The line between what is a journalist and what isn't a journalist is a lot fuzzier than it used to be. So how are you thinking that through from the journalist side of the equation? Because a lot of times a small business would love to be covered by an influencer or covered by somebody who's a subject matter expert in a category, but wouldn't necessarily look like they have typical journalist credentials.
Exactly.
So where's that line, and is it fuzzy or is it pretty bright?
So one of the things I did this time around is I partnered with a company called Muckrack. And Muckrack has the distinction of basically having a profile on every conceivable journalist in the world. What they write about, what they talk about, how they talk. There are literally profiles on every single. I'm just looking to see if there's one on you. But
there is. Gregory was on the podcast, but because I've written so much, awesome. I love Greg. So yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, Greg is the bomb. And he reached out to me and said, hey, what can we do together? So there's what we're doing is we're creating it should launch hopefully next week, a profile section. Every journalist who submits their query can post their Muckrack profile, right. Which will allow the sources to determine, hey, this guy, he might not be big, but his following is exactly my audience.
Right.
Right. And that's great to see, because that allows the journalists to prove who they are, and also lets the source create better, more qualified pitches right to them that help them. So everyone wins there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other challenge, and I don't know if there's an easy way to solve it, is, categorization, right, is always a challenge, because if it's one email, it starts to get unwieldy at a certain point, and yet there's also serendipity. Like, you don't want to eliminate serendipity, because sometimes your most interesting stuff comes from serendipity. So how are you thinking through that idea of sort of compartmentalizing or categorizing versus just having a person scroll through and be like, oh wow, that's right, that's something I have to respond to?
So the best way to put it, the queries themselves are put into specific categories that the journalists pick, right?
Right.
Business, finance, healthcare, lifestyle, general. We're going to add more categories. We're adding, I think we're adding, I know we have travel. We're adding a couple more. We have tech. I don't remember what they're. We're adding some more categories, and it's basically you open the email, it's a super easy scroll, right? Yeah. You read the email, and in 10 seconds you figured out, okay, there's something here I can answer. There's nothing here today. Great, delete. And that's the beauty of it. If there's nothing there, you've wasted 10 seconds of your life, and that's it. If there's something there, you could be in the Wall Street Journal tomorrow. So there's that benefit of being able to grow the categories to help both journalists and sources find what they need when they need it immediately. A source might be sitting on a massive story that they want to share, and they don't know who to go to. And one day they see a journalist that's covering something that pretty much fits, and they say, "Hey, I had this idea for that. Oh, I love that." So there is serendipity, which is nice, but it's also a very usable, straightforward service as well.
Right. Do you eventually foresee, allowing people to have essentially a separate email by category if it gets too cluttered, or you haven't really
If big
thought
enough,
that?
by all means. If they want just the lifestyle queries, just the travel queries, I see no reason why not. Yeah, I mean, that's something we can definitely do in the future.
Right.
It has to get bigger first. I mean, 20,000 members, it's not there yet.
Yeah.
100,000, who knows? And I have no doubt that we can actually get there.
Right. The one of the challenges in, sort of digital PR coverage or PR coverage is, sometimes the best way to get the coverage is to figure out what the bigger story is, which isn't
Exactly.
necessarily you. It's like, how do you get an opportunity to go along for the ride? So when I got, for example, my Fire Island Beach house covered in the Wall Street Journal Mansions section, it was because I pitched the Mansions editor on a bigger story. And then, I just plugged into that story. So
this is, mind you, this to the audience listening, this is Kevin's way of saying I have a Fire Island Beach house. So cool.
not
All right.
anymore, not anymore. I sold it. That was actually the reason I got the PR, was because I wanted to make sure that it got covered. I got it covered in the New York Post and the Wall Street Journal with two completely different pitches, both of which were not about the house, but about a bigger story. But interestingly, the guy who bought the Fire Island house from me was the heir to the Subway sandwich fortune, not the guy who actually made the sandwiches. The radiologist's son, the radiologist was who invested in Subway.
Unreal.
So, and I believe he's actually since sold it because it was a while back. He had it for like 5 or 6 years. That's neither here nor there. But this idea of like, what is the bigger story, right? Which is important for the journalist to think about, right? Because often journalists don't want to just cover a story that about a company. Like Elon can get away with just getting coverage for himself, right?
Yeah,
and maybe the top 3% of companies and or CEOs are newsworthy in and of themselves, but everyone else sort of has to find something to go along for the ride with, right?
And the difference also is you don't want to get coverage like Elon. If you're a small business, chances are your business is not going to survive you being considered a dick.
Right. Yeah, that's a valid point as well. Yeah. But I guess really the point is, from a general PR perspective, both from the journalist's hat and the businesses responding to an SOS query, how should they make sure that they're not a dick, right? That they're not like overly pitching, but really more pitching like, here's what's going on in the industry. Here's what's going on, with people who are solving this problem, and trying to fit their narrative into the bigger narrative.
I think the key is create a pitch that is short, 3 paragraphs at the most, that answers the query the journalist asked. Hey, you were doing a story about Fire Island Beach houses. As someone who owns a Fire Island Beach house, I can tell you the problems I've had with them, because you're doing a story on problems with Fire Island Beach houses. Problem number 1, problem number 2, problem number 3. Here's my contact info. More than happy to chat. Bye. That's it.
Right.
And the second point is set an alarm for when those emails come out and answer immediately.
Interesting.
Because by the time, if you wait an hour or 2, they've already gotten 200 pitches.
Well, I guess that brings to mind the fact that future versions of this might need some kind of additional push notification, like SMS, for example, right? Like especially if I'm a PR professional and time is of the essence, I'd pay a premium, right, to get an SMS on it.
Well, and the key is, I mean, that takes a lot of planning, and also that's not cheap. I have always been under the premise that I want SOS to be free. There are plenty of paid services out there.
Right.
I've heard mixed reviews. My goal is to keep it free.
Right.
If there is a way to create sponsorship, to create something like that, I'm up for anything. But the goal is to keep it free for users and free for journalists. So doing that, that's my ultimate goal.
Right. Right. So do you find that people are setting up their email readers in a way to either flag it when it comes in, the people who really do want to
use AI to do that? Yeah. And also I found that there are some people who set their alarms have figured out a way to create their alarm on their iPhone for when that specific email comes in. So it's a different
Interesting.
alarm, like at 5:45 a.m. It wakes them up. They read it. They see if there's anything to answer first thing in the morning. They go back to sleep. I think it's awesome.
Well, I've certainly been scrolling through them, since your relaunch, and there's quite the diversity of requests in there, and sort of it's a two-sided marketplace, right? And so to your point about the early bird catching the worm from a response perspective, is that something you have to manage as the product owner and think through, like, well, we don't really want people to get completely inundated. And so if the list ends up being 100,000, 200,000, 450,000, at a certain point, does it become unwieldy and you need to figure out how to control that?
That will be the best possible problem I could have, and I look forward to having to tackle it.
Any other things that you've got cooking from a product roadmap perspective that you can share now?
For SOS right now, hopefully to do more with Muckrack. They're a really great company. I really love what they're doing. And yeah, just to continue to grow it and continue to build it. I think there are a billion journalists out there who don't know it exists yet because we're so new. And that being the case, I'm starting on a push to them. And then just to grow it from a user perspective as well.
Well, absolutely. Muckrack is well respected by both sides of the ecosystem, and I think when Gregory launched that, or when Greg launched that, he really saw that vacuum, right? And for you to be sort of back in the game, on your side, proves that there's also a vacuum that you're solving for and that you're filling.
Definitely.
Well, thanks so much for relaunching, right? I'm looking forward to scrolling through the queries on a daily basis and seeing which of my 4 personalities it fits with as I answer them.
Exactly. Happy to do
Appreciate
it.
you joining.
Always a pleasure, Kevin. Anytime.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.